Well, welcome everyone and good morning, and thank you so much for joining me today for my dissertation defense, which explores a student-directed approach to help teachers support the diverse needs of students in inclusive educational settings. The definition of inclusive education, special education, and even different ways of accessing educational support varies across Canada because education is provincially regulated. So for example, in this diagram, students who are formally identified with disabilities as represented by the colored dots, sometimes are just simply placed into a classroom with other students who are not formally identified with the disability as represented by the green dots. And this really can lead to stigmatization. Another example could be students who self-identify as having a disability as well as those who have formal disabilities, and they may receive support among the rest of the students. But the green dots are still dominant, and they're the dominant group in which the colored dots have to fit into. So Dr. Shelley Moore had a different perspective of the assimilation of the green and the colored dots. She said, rather than finding out why students aren't green, our job is now to find out what their color is. What do they bring? What can they contribute because of their diverse and unique expertise? For decades, we've been trying to take this color out of our students, taking the special out of special education and the autistic out of autism. Teaching to diversity and inclusion is where we value the characteristics that are diverse and not try to homogenize them. The only way to ensure there was no other was not to make us all green, but instead to make us all another. And so Dr. Moore's definition really included of diversity and inclusion, really included all identities. Today, what I'm going to be focusing on is the identity of ability. And that includes students with visible disabilities, with invisible disabilities, students with challenges and without challenges. So according to Statistics Canada, 67% of youth-reported disabilities are invisible, with the majority being mental health-related disorders, learning challenges, as well as pain-related disorders. And there is even some disabilities, or there's even some that are unreported due to stigma and due to fear of unfair treatment. And so there are really two different needs or two different problems that I've identified. The first is that needs sometimes are not efficiently identified early due to different varying policies, provincial policies, and also when the support is provided, the strategies may not be effective because if the student is not involved in the process or if they may feel stigmatized. But teachers also face challenges. They sometimes have a lack of time, lack of resources, and lack of support in the classroom. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to develop an online student-directed holistic assessment tool that would help teachers save time in identifying and effectively supporting the diverse needs of all students in inclusive classroom settings and develop motivated, self-regulated learners. So I did this with a design-based research methodology, or DBR for short. And so this design-based research is really links theory to practice. And there are many different ways of doing design-based research. So I adapted mine from McKinney and Reeves, who has a three-phase approach. And the first phase starts with understanding the theory and how we can develop a solution to solve the problem. And then in the second phase, that's really the testing of the solution through different iterative cycles of testing. And then in the third phase, it's all about designing reflection and designing principles that can be transferable and used. And so I'm going to take you through each of these phases. And the first phase, we've just identified the problem. And so the next phase is the literature review. So the first theme that I came across is how motivation is impacted by strength-based assessments. So first of all, Climbing and Henley had reported that most traditional psychological assessments really are deficit-based, and they don't have a lot of focus on strengths. However, Brownlee's study found that when students have the opportunity to co-create their own strength-based learning profiles or learning plans, they increase their awareness of their learning skills and abilities. And then also, Kate and Basham also found that when students are involved in the assessment process, they have a deeper understanding of their strengths and needs. Burroughs' study on personalized learning environments found that many teachers were receptive to including interests in the curriculum. However, fewer teachers were receptive to providing meaningful choice, especially at the high school level. And then some of these mixed views could be related to the misconceptions of self-directed learning and self-regulated learning. So self-regulated learning, for instance, is really the application of cognitive skills to academic tasks. And these skills really require explicit instruction by the teacher. But a lot of teachers have reported that they may not have the training to teach these skills. And so, but research has said that in order to become a self-directed learner, you first need to be a self-regulated learner. And that's what we're looking at today. And so finally, the other research is Nelson and Laurie and Basham said that universal design for learning, or UDL for short, is one way of meeting the needs of diverse students. And this is done by providing students with multiple ways of receiving the information they get, multiple ways of engaging in the content, and multiple ways of demonstrating their understanding. And it can also sustain a student autonomy when students are involved in the assessment process and the goal setting process. But they also said it would be even more effective if teachers were provided with support in the implementation of UDL strategies. So my student focus in the literature review really led me to design a student-centered theoretical framework. So based upon humanistic and motivational theorists. So starting with Dewey. Dewey was a pragmatist who really believed that, in learning by doing, or the theory to practice. And he also believed that learning was derived through prior experiences, and that teachers are facilitators who guide students in helping students actively be involved in their learning and also in goal setting. Rogers shared the same views as Dewey, but Carl Rogers shared the same view, but he really said that more responsibility should be placed upon the students. And he really believed in self-directed learning, because he argued that intrinsic motivation really comes from students taking ownership as well of their own learning. And my views were, I had similar views with both of them in different perspectives. I maintain a relativist ontology, which I believe that there's multiple realities that exist, but it really depends on each unique perspective of everybody's different perspectives. And this was really important to my research, because I relied, for my data, I relied on different multiple views when I collected my data. As a interpretivist, constructivist, and pragmatist, I also believe that learning is constructed through prior experiences, meaningful social interactions, and the application of theory to practice. And so I took into consideration Dewey's and Rogers' views that were so student-directed, and that led me to the self-determination theory by Dici and Ryan. And what they indicated was intrinsic motivation is triggered by a combination of all three things. One, that students feel competent, that they have a sense of autonomy, and that they have a sense of belonging through relatedness. But what's also different about their theory and others is that they felt that motivation was on a continuum, starting with amotivation, where students don't have any motivation at all, through 4 stages of a controlled and autonomous motives, or extrinsic motivation, which eventually led to intrinsic motivation. And this led me to my research questions, which were based upon the self-determination theory. I first wanted to understand how students, how the assessment tool might impact students' motivation, and that's students with and without learning challenges. And I also wanted to understand how the teacher's perceptions of the effectiveness of the tool in helping them support students with their needs for relatedness, autonomy, and competence. And I also wanted to understand how the outcomes of the assessment tool might help teachers identify and support the needs of diverse students in the classroom.